when I was a young communicator, I would spend all my time, again, trying to convince. And then I naturally cared a lot about what people thought of me. Like, did I do it well? Was I clever?
Yeah.
Did I look well? Did I look well read? Like all the things that you naturally do in critiquing it. Now, one of my most important, not only, but one of my most important things I need before I go into a message is, how has this changed me? And if it has, then my natural posture is, you have to get this.
Well, hey friends, it's Adam. You're listening to The Conversation. Today is episode 275. What is up? 275 episodes. And today's guest is one of my absolute favorite human beings, Megan Fate Marshman. Friends, wherever you are, just know I'm so glad you're tuning in. Each week, I do these conversations for you, the listeners. I don't do it for myself. I genuinely do it for you. Before we go any further, though, and more than that, I want to give a huge shout out to our partners. Each week, these conversations are made possible because of our partners. Now, hear this. All of my partners, I know these organizations and I trust them fully, and that's why I want you to know about them as well. Our first partner is the International Justice Mission. If you don't know anything about IJM, I've got you covered. IJM is a global nonprofit working to end slavery and violence around the world. Friends, every single day, children and women and men face the reality of modern day slavery and exploitation. Why? Because often the people in power prey on the vulnerabilities that poverty creates. In light of this, IJM is on a mission to partner with local communities to build a world where everyone can expect to be safe and protected. If you're listening right now and you want to take part in this mission to protect the vulnerable around the world, think about, and more than that, pray about, and more than that, take action and become a freedom partner. A freedom partner is someone who supports IJM on a monthly basis. My wife and I, we are freedom partners ourselves. To find out more, visit IJM.org. Again, that's IJM.org, and find the button that says Freedom Partner and click on that. Our second partner is Generous Coffee. I love Generous Coffee. I love their founder, Ben Higgins. He's a friend of mine. I cannot say enough about them. Generous Coffee doesn't just sell amazing coffee. They also make a positive impact by donating, listen to this, 100% of the money they make to nonprofits that help others all around the world. The church I pastor brews Generous Coffee every week. The response has been amazing. If your church or business brews coffee, you can buy Generous Coffee in bulk. The prices, the last time we looked at prices, Generous Coffee was cheaper or the same price as any other place that we were able to find coffee. I can't say this strongly enough. Go visit generouscoffee.com. Again, if you're a business leader, pastor, do it for your business, your church, generouscoffee.com. Okay, in today's episode, again, I got to have a conversation with the amazing Megan Fate Marshman. I share about this in the interview, but Megan came and shared at Embrace, the church I'm at, I want to say like a month and a half ago, and the response was insane. Genuinely insane. I think it's one of the best messages I've ever heard preached. Our Instagram for our church has over doubled because of 2 reels that we shared. It's insane. In this interview though, Megan and I, we talk about the messy parts of life and how God can even use our mess. We also talk about her preaching and what's changed in her preaching and why is it connecting with people the way that it is. If you're a pastor, if you're a communicator, you're not going to want to miss that part of the conversation. We also discuss the internal perspective that she gained through the unexpected loss of her husband, Randy. Friends, as always, on that note, sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation.
So there's a gal who I met a year ago, and she walked into my home church and she went to receive prayer, which all of us should go to receive prayer anytime it's an option. I don't know why it has become like shameful to like respond needing prayer. Turns out we all need prayer, and the most powerful ones know where to go. Anyways, this gal walks in, and then the only reason I knew about her was because one of the prayer workers runs out, and it is This gal is challenging and mentally unstable. I can only imagine, given the parts of her life that she has shared, that it's not her fault that she is as unstable as she is.
Yeah.
But it's hard and very negative, and speaks negative, 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 negative. Won't even look up negative, 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 negative. And won't even receive prayer, but she's in the right place. Negative, negative, negative. And it's hard, and there's language, and there's a smell, and it's really rough. Okay, now, this is not the messy part of my life, because in that moment, she and I interface. It's negative. I'm super dependent upon the Lord. And in that moment, I felt this nudge of like, hug her. And I'm like, I don't want to. And I don't think it was like, I don't know, the blend of sin in me, or just like the flesh in general, or just being human. Like when you smell something, you don't move toward it.
Yep.
And when something's difficult and frustrating, you don't move toward it typically. Like that's, I think, human nature. I don't know. I'm trying to like, I know there's sin mixed in that as well, of like, I want to remain. So, okay. Anyways, in that moment, the Spirit nudges me to like hug her, and it's like, and I did. And mind you, I'm aware that in that moment, it's the right thing. And it felt like Christ in me doing that. It didn't feel like a kind version of Megan. It felt like that was Christ in me, the best moment. And so I hug her, we depart. I don't hear about her again until 3 weeks ago, when she walks into my weekly Bible study. And we kind of collide again. And she's like, you're the one that hugged me. And I'm like, I am. And here's you said, bring up the messy part of my life. The things that come up in me in working with challenging people, whether that's someone like her, or my kids, or my own reactions to things. I just think the messiest part of me is in me, and it comes out. And I think the even messier part of it is I know how to hide it, and I know how to not let anyone see it, and to try to deal with it on my own. So the messiest part is that there's this wrestle within in me that I'm really grateful. And it reminds me of Romans chapter 8, where it's like, this flesh is powerful. Now my gratitude in it is I'm aware of how powerful it is. That there's this flesh in me that's a blend of sin, human nature, like being born into sin. It's all of that. But there's also the Spirit at work in me. And so I'd say the messiest part is this battle that sometimes the Spirit, I feel like, wins, and sometimes he doesn't. I don't fully understand what my role is in the participation. Like I want to go, all I do is I let the Holy Spirit consume, overwhelm, and then I just naturally respond by the fruit of his Spirit, which is love, joy, peace, patience. But I know myself. So the messiest part is like, I feel like Paul, I do what I don't want to do. And sometimes I don't do what I do want to do. And it feels messy and frustrating. And I wish that spiritual maturity meant there was less of that, but it feels like the more I know Jesus, I'm actually more aware of the worst versions of me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I feel like I'm listening to myself right now. That was a question I didn't expect to ask. Why, can you try to explain just a little bit, why did you feel like you should hug her? Like a nudge, like explain that. Like, cause I feel, cause that's something I feel like I'm leaning into more and more and more. That moment with her, but also that moment on stage at our women's event where you kind of spoke into a gal. By the way, that was, I've spoke with the family. It's something that will never be forgotten by them because it was so spot on. So explain all of that. Like,
now here's the fun part. So in that moment, I did the right thing. So, and the right thing was not just the behavior. The right thing was what happened when I felt uncomfortable. So I'll do those two different examples. One is with the challenging woman, and the other is blessing someone on stage at your church. Okay. Yep. Challenging woman. I'm caught off guard, uncomfortable. Everything in me wants to get out of that, right? But there was a moment, and this is where we could dissect it, I go, how can I remember to do this more often? Because for the most part, I don't, which is why the part of me I don't like comes out. But in the moment that the good part of me, Christ in me, came out, the hug, I took a moment and went, Lord, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. and all these people were like watching, and it was like a scene in the middle of our church. And I think the last thing people expected, but when it happened, it was like, of course, a hug. Like in retelling the story, it's like, of course, that's what she needed. And to the point where a year later, she remembers at me as the one that hugged her. And after it happened, she literally looked at me and said, someone hasn't hugged me for years.
Ugh.
So like, it was the right move, right? But what led me there, I think, was a acknowledgement that I didn't know what to do, because I knew what my flesh wanted to do, which was get the heck out of there. Okay, now let's go to the different scenario, a really beautiful moment at your church. We got to do this women's event, and I wanted to land it. So I did it. I did the women's event based on my book, Relaxed, which is based on Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, which most people know is trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. At the very last line, that he will direct your path, it's basically talking about what we're talking about. How does he do that? As I trust in him with all my heart, he directs my path. So I think that's the formula. That's not always a formula, but at least in that moment, I trust in the Lord with all my heart with that one woman, because I was going, I feel unsafe. I feel scared. I feel like everyone's watching me and I want to do the right thing. Like that was all wrapped into that little quick prayer with the Lord.
Yep.
Now on stage, the reason we did the blessing, where I literally had the entire audience turn and bless each other, and I explained what that was from someone who taught that to me, which is basically hand on the shoulder, eye contact, looking in the eyes, saying their name, waiting for some truth to kind of come into your mind, like opening your heart to the Lord. And by the way, that's really uncomfortable. And I've done this probably like 5 or 6 times before on stage. And I have like a phrase, because I'm modeling it. I'm modeling it for the entire audience before they get out of their comfort zone and turn toward each other and let the Lord direct someone else's path through them. It's
Yes.
a very powerful experience. And so I'm modeling it. I know what I want to say on stage to the gal I'm modeling it to, something that would be helpful and equipping for everyone in the room. That's comfortable for me. I already know it. It would have been this: the person's name, may you know that your heavenly Father loves you. Everyone needs to know that more. It's safe. It sets everyone else up in the audience well. But it's funny, in that moment, she walks on stage and I felt that little like, Megan, I want you to risk a little here if you're asking other people. And it's not a risk for me to say their name, may you know that your heavenly Father loves you. That one's easy. That's what the gal who taught me how to bless did. And so in that moment, I stretched myself and waited a little longer until I heard something else. I knew I could have done that one easier. And there was a linger. I mean, literally there's like hundreds of people watching on stage, and I'm lingering in silence because I taught them to do this. I taught them to say the person's name and then to wait and see what the Lord brings, which, by the way, that moment is so uncomfortable because you're nervous. They're staring at you. You're conscious of them staring at you. You're conscious of your face. Like there's all these battling fleshly things that happen. But in that moment, I felt like, okay, God, okay, I'm going to risk on this one. I don't actually remember what I said, Adam, but I waited. It was probably this long, and I want to do it on the podcast because I still remember when Mr. Rogers was like, do you want to know how long a minute is? And then he sat there with a clock, and it went a whole minute. And the kid left. So similarly, so it was her name, and then I waited. Okay. And then I said something very simple, but it was even shocking for me that God would use someone who's willing. And what are they willing to do? They're willing to lean not on their own understanding of everything, lean not on my guess for them. I'm leaning on the Lord, trusting with him with all my heart. And in that moment, God, I need something to say. I need something to say. Lean not on my own understanding of them, but in all my ways acknowledge him. So God, here you are, you're with me. So I'm acknowledging like you want to use me because I'm your body. What would you say to this woman? And wait. And then whatever came up, I said, and then like tears for me in that moment was like, gosh, I want to be surprised like that. And I think that's the thing, Adam. I want to be doing ministry in such a way where I'm amazed by God instead of impressed with myself. I want to but that takes risk, takes vulnerability. And I'll tell you this, it takes slowing down and waiting.
Yeah, that was incredible. Seriously, the family has stopped me and said it was one of the most profound moments of her entire life, what you spoke into her. So kind of similar, I'm going to honor you, but I'm actually getting somewhere with this. So you came and shared at Embrace, Megan, and it was unbelievable. Both the women's event, Also the Sunday morning, people kept coming up to me and they said it. And then I think they realized like, okay, that's a little awkward to say to Adam, but it wasn't awkward for me to hear at all. People kept saying, I think that's the best message I've ever heard in my life. And then they'd kind of like, oh, shoot, I'm saying this to the person who's the pastor here. And I was like, and I totally agree. Like, that's what I kept saying was I totally agree. And then Instagram verified it, by the way. And I'm sharing this to get to the point. Our Instagram, since sharing 2 reels of you, has over doubled in size. Our Instagram following because of those 2 reels. I mean, that's insane. Like, just even the marketing nerd in me. So here's the questions. What has happened in your preaching, and what has God been doing inside of you to do that? Because there's something there, and I'm not asking the question because I'm impressed with you, Megan. I'm asking the question because I'm impressed with the God inside of you. What would you say to that?
I have 2 thoughts. First one is in response to the best message ever heard. It's really funny because I would agree that that is the best message they've ever heard, because I literally laid out an only explicit gospel, which is the best message.
You preached the entire book of Romans. It was like, how did she just do that?
Yeah. But think about it. I mean, it's the Romans road to the gospel is what I did. And it is literally, I mean, think about it. Why you and I are on a podcast, why we surrendered our lives is because of that exact message. Of course, told with, someone standing up there and being changed by the message and then sharing it. So it is the literal best message. So I can't take credit for that one. That was in the book of Romans, and it is the best message. And it's my favorite message to share, is that. And I hope that I'm sharing it all the time. Okay. So what has happened in my preaching? Something actually has happened in my preaching in the past few years. And it happened, I was I'm getting my doctorate, and I had a preaching teaching class by a guy named Kyle Strobel, who is brilliant. And he did this whole thing. And I mean, it has changed how I preach. He goes, what if our job is not to just give more content or feel the pressure to like convince people of that content? It's already true. So our job is to pastor the conscience that comes up. And I was like, we spent the entire class like dissecting this. And here's what I've come up with. So for instance, if I stand on a stage and say, God loves you, that, by the way, is true. What else is true is, Adam, you're sitting there going, yes, Lord. And you're humbly going, I want to know it more. And you look over at the prodigal son picture to your right, and you look and I'm reading the book, by the way, and it is transformational, about Rembrandt's painting. Thank you. So good. Last night, just
so good.
So you're going, I want to know it more. And then the person to your left is like wearing a football jersey and like, I couldn't care less. And then the person, not that everyone wearing football jerseys is doing that, but maybe.
They have no souls. Keep going though.
Yeah, no, go Jets. Okay, so then the person to their left is going, okay, but what does that have to do with like anything? Or how can I like know that more? And then the person to their left is like, you don't know what I did last night. And then the person to their left is going, okay. And the person to their left is like, how can a loving God fill in the blank? So that's all happening in people's minds as we just say something that's true. And I thought my job was to overly explain the truth, but the truth is truth, and it's sharper than a double-edged sword. So it can do something. And what he's doing, I think what that passage is telling us is that it's literally beginning to open up, divide, right, bone marrow. I think it's beginning to open up. And then our job, I think, as pastors, is to pastor the conscience and what's rising to the surface. So since that class, I have had more people come up to me and say things like, I felt like you were talking to me, and I'm going, because I was. I thought about you before, and I'm actually taking all my content and making it less, and then spending all my time imagining how are people hearing this thing, or what questions are arising. So when I go to prepare a message now, I'm going, well, what's arising in me? I read a passage and I go, I don't get it. That's what's rising in me. So I want to address that when I read the passage. Maybe what's coming in me is going, okay, like I just recently spoke at a chapel at a university, and I got to teach on the whole, like, consider it pure joy when you face trials. What?
Yeah.
That's what comes up in me. And so in this message, am doing and pastoring and letting people know, I see them and how they're receiving this. So the gospel message, for instance, when I was sharing that one, it was funny because I shared it 3 separate services, but they were very different, to be honest with you, because of the people that I was seeing in the audience. There was one guy in that 3rd service who had his head down, arms crossed, and was so hard. And so I am only imagining what made him that hard. So the entire message, I'm giving the exact same truth, the exact same scriptures, but what I'm pastoring, and if you read back, or if someone could watch all 3 services, they would see a very different message on the 3rd one that was all about secrets and hardness and what makes us feel like we have to figure that out. And I'm just looking at a guy, but I'll tell you this, Adam, and I think you and I both know what makes us better preachers over time is sitting face to face with people who are in all of those camps, because suddenly I have their language because I listen to them. So I know the gal who walks in who's, mentally unstable, and what she needs is physical touch. Okay. And then what that guy with the arms crossed needs is to use the word secret, and then just let it sit there, knowing full well that people's conscience is going off. I say secret right now, and everyone listening to our podcast is going to something.
Yeah.
Now I can pastor the conscience. And by the way, if I use the word secret, and I just want to tell you, when I uncovered one of mine to one of my closest friends, and she reminded me of that passage that he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins. And then he doesn't stop there, and to purify us from all unrighteousness. That's how she responded, because she knows how the Lord responded and responds to my sin. And he, in that moment of uncovering the secret, that's how he responds. I just couldn't help myself about creating a moment. If secret is what you're living in that shame of, and then the problem is with that secret, now you're having to hide the secret, and then all that stuff comes up in you, and you feel like you might be found out, or you're hearing everything through the lens of people maybe knowing your secret. I mean, I've been there. And so I think what's changed in my preaching is 2 things. Number 1, pastoring the conscience. Number 2, allowing my conscience to be uncovered in my preparation, so that the message changes me. And I said this somewhere recently.
So good.
This was so helpful for me. When I was a young communicator, I would spend all my time, again, trying to convince. And then I naturally cared a lot about what people thought of me. Like, did I do it well? Was I clever? Did I look well? Did I look well read? Like all the things that you naturally do in critiquing it. Now, one of my most important, not only, but one of my most important things I need before I go into a message is, how has this changed me? And if it has, then my natural posture is, you have to get this. So when I do the gospel message in service number 3, and it's based on that guy, and I'm using the term secret, I'm thinking of that moment with my friend when my secret came out and the freedom I felt. And I wanted that guy to experience that, not that guy to listen to me. And that's the difference. Suddenly I'm seeing the guy and I'm not like, I need to win him over. 5 years ago, I would have tried to win him over. Now I'm going, I have tasted, I have experienced that. You don't have to live in that shame and secret. Now, mind you, there's consequences, but turns out the consequences are actually for your good too. So for me, I wasn't just preaching to that guy's secrets. I was reminded of my own.
Megan, you have such a gift of communicating the nuances of feelings, of awkwardness, humor, whatever. You just are so good, because you'll explain it and you're like, oh my gosh, I felt every little nuance of that. One last question on that.
A little dance again for all of us.
Yeah, one last question on that. Away from preaching and like changes you've done, is there anything else that you would say, this is what has changed in the last few years in your soul?
Oh man.
Like as a person, yes, as a pastor and speaker, but
yeah. And life circumstance, if people aren't aware, it is important probably for people to know that my husband went to heaven 3.5 years ago. And it's weird to even put that in a string of a sentence and not be emotive.
Yeah.
Because, by the way, I've learned how to protect my heart in saying that sentence. So going to heaven feels a lot better and easier than how else I could say it. But he went to heaven, And the reason I bring that up is because the other obviously significant thing that changed in talking with my friends about what happened in me with that is that suddenly, if the covenant was promised of two becoming one, then half of me went to heaven. And I feel like that's one of those superpowers of grief, that if you have experienced grief, you will, by the way, if you haven't, but if you have, I want to remind you of a superpower, which, by the way, I would give back. But I will take the superpower because I can't. And here's a superpower. You care a lot less about the things that don't matter, and you care a whole lot more about the things that do. And so with half of me in eternity, and I think about it sometimes when I'm like, especially when I'm stressed, I'm like, in light of eternity, or an eternal perspective on this one, like when my boys misbehave, an eternal perspective on it is like, this is where you get to show them the power of grace, not, man, they're annoying. Why won't they just obey? Like, that I have a chance. There's my husband and my son right there in the picture. I have a chance of having his perspective, an eternal one that goes like, man, in light of eternity, their little hearts being loved cares a lot more than them pretending to obey.
Yeah.
And being unchanged. When their heart naturally, just like me, doesn't want to obey. So I want them to know that the Spirit's in them, and that wrestle is actually an okay thing.
I was just gonna, and I tried to even separate it as I was asking this question from even what you've walked through. My question, and it sounds foolish to ask, is how does a person get that? Like, as a communicator, as a human being, but the only way is through things that you would never wish upon your worst enemy, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's why I always gravitate towards people who have been through battles and have been through great loss, because they have a perspective that is so different than prior to that. And anything to add to that, Megan? Like, again, I was really trying to ask it as if I didn't know anything about you. It's like, how do you get that then? Like, whatever you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, trials, everyone, I think trials are relatable. So we don't need to compare trials by any means, but all of them do something. And God can use them in really unique ways, that successes just are limited.
Yeah.
So I'd say open up the trials. Don't ignore them. Don't push them aside. Open them up. And this just takes time. I can't reiterate this enough. When I say open up a trial, this takes time. It takes sitting on your couch, being aware of the Lord's presence, and opening it. Even if it's like, I think that friend is mad at me. That's a little mini trial. Like, open it up. Maybe they are. But what's rising in me as I'm worried that they're mad at me? What is this, like, everyone has to be pleased with me thing that's like making me so unsettled? Am I rooted in the pleasure of people? Am I rooted in that? Like, if you take the time, the Spirit who lives in there, and by the way, this is for people who have handed their life over to Christ and received the life of Christ. If that's you, then the Spirit of the living God is like interceding on your behalf. And I think we don't have to shy away from the negative things that rise up in us, because I think he wants to use those too. I think part of our spiritual maturity is looking at those things with him, not just looking at our gifts and using them, by all means. But again, I'm with you on the, man, pre-Randy going to heaven. Like 7 years ago, I was just in this summer season, unaware and so grateful. And I'll tell you, if you are in that summer season listening in and you're like, not huge trials, that is a really great gift. And if I could give you any wisdom, which I think the Lord deposited this to me because one of my closest friends, one of my bridesmaids, was my grandmother, who was 94. Slow down in relationships and listen. I can't tell people enough that one area that we can all grow to become more like Jesus is to ask more questions instead of try to be the one that has all the better answers. Ask more questions. And that is very Jesus-y. I think the stat that's ringing in my head right now, I think he was asked what was it? He was something crazy, like he was asked 184 questions. He asked like 307, and of the 184, whatever, so that he was asked, he only answered 3 directly. Oh my gosh. This is Jesus, who literally is the one who had the answer to every single question that could ever be asked, which I think is modeling for us, like, what to do with relationships. Questions. So if you want a practical, how could I become more like Jesus? Here it is. Ask more questions, linger longer. And if you want to be a communicator, be a better listener, because then you'll be able to communicate and pastor conscience that you're aware of because you've actually explored it with people.
Oh, that's so good. So good. Okay. Last thing I want to get to, relaxed. So are you a relaxed person? I'm not. I'm naturally hurried, don't have enough time, stressed, and yet I crave relaxed. And so, yeah, are you a relaxed person naturally? What is that journey? What does that journey look like for you? How have you found it? Jump into that.
Relaxed. I have so much to say about relaxed, but I'll make it simple and brief because I know we don't have much time. Relaxed is an amazing byproduct in a really crappy pursuit, I've learned. So byproduct, relaxed. An easier way to put it is like the fruit of the Holy Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. And yes, I'm purposely saying them slower so you could see what it feels like. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. This is a fruit or a byproduct of the Holy Spirit. It's not the fruit or byproduct of our efforts. It's not something we strive for. It's not the goal. The goal is Christ likeness. The goal is Christ in me, I in him. The fruit is the byproduct of that. So we don't pursue the fruit. We pursue Christ. We pursue being in him as he is in us. Yeah. I'm not naturally, my like top strength is like activator. Let's go. I'm passionate. I'm driven. I talk too fast. And I talk a lot slower since understanding this concept. And a lot of it was a deep dive for my dissertation, actually, to understand why in the world would Dallas Willard, who I looked up to in the topic of spiritual formation, when he was asked to describe Jesus in one word, his answer was relaxed. This book that I wrote entitled Relaxed is literally my journey of going, I want to understand that. And the truth is, at the end of the book writing process, turning it in, my lead pastor walks into this office and he goes, all right, you turned in a book entitled Relaxed. You're done with the book. Do you feel more relaxed? And my answer was no.
Oh, no.
But here it is, Adam. But I know what to do now when I'm not. That's the key.
So, okay. Oh my gosh. Two or three things that you're like, this has helped me on that journey.
Honest prayer being probably the main one. Instead of performance prayer. I think I shared this with the gals at your church. I used to, go to the Lord, dear Lord, thank you for this day. And I had this little kind of routine and try to confess, tried to my acronym now I got from a guy named Robert Watson from Sun Valley. It's tacos. How fun is this? Tacos. T, Thanksgiving. A, adoration. Just adore him. C, confession. O, pray for others. We forget that one when we're teaching. And then S is self at the very end. Tacos. That's fun. Okay. So I always do my little tacos and I perform. Lord, I'm so okay. But here's the problem. My mind would wander all the time in prayer. And then I would pause the prayer, shame myself back to my tacos prayer. And sorry about that. Not sure what happened there. I'm back. And then I'd continue my little performance. So then one of my professors, Dr. John Coe, goes, Megan, I say Megan as if it was a one-on-one. It was in class. He goes, a wandering mind in prayer is a gift. Because where is your mind wandering to? Likely it's the thing that has your heart. Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. I wonder if we don't have to pause the prayer. And what God's doing in our wandering mind is uncovering the very thing we could actually talk to him about. I think we've learned how to perform at God instead of do life with him. And that's where the pray without ceasing, it hasn't been something I haven't pursued. I'm going to try to pray without ceasing more.
Yeah.
But honestly, my desire to do that, instead of trying to do that by myself, I'm going to pray without ceasing. I got this. I'm going like this, God, I want to pray more, help me. And the weird part, Adam, he's answered that prayer. Even now, if I'm just saying, pray without ceasing, everyone's going, I want to pray more. You're right. Now, here's the question. Are you going to go try and do that in your autonomy? Relying on your flesh. This is the second concept. Autonomy. We get so good at, when we see we're not as we should be, trying to make ourselves better. And this is where the gospel is so beautiful, because we couldn't get to him. God came to us. It's our job. It's not to strive after him. It's to open to him, which again is slower, it's more intimate, it's consistent, it's disciplined. For me it is, but it's no longer autonomous. When I sit in church and I hear an amazing sermon, rather than just trying to get better at putting off my anger, I go to God and I go, teach me about my anger. Help me put it off. I now rely more, and the byproduct, love, joy, peace, patience, kind. It's the byproduct of intimacy with Jesus, not the byproduct of our effort to become more like him by ourselves.
Oh, that's so good. Last question is totally a self-seeking question. You're so busy. How, and we talked a little bit about just the travel and this and that. How do you stay relaxed in that?
I'm more disciplined than I've ever been in my life. Also, I've been risking a lot more in my faith. And Adam, since you and I were in person together a few weeks ago, I did a crazy risk. And I said to the gal that runs the ministry with me, I'm going to do less because I don't want to be busy anymore. And it's risky. I mean, it's financially risky. And then I went, I'm actually going to hire another person on our team so that this one gal can do more of this stuff, and this other guy who we actually hired can do more of this stuff. And it's beautiful because I'm going, they're actually gifted uniquely to me. And I have a lot of opportunity to do things, but I don't have to do everything. And so I'm like starting to kind of hand things to each of them. And like, it's beautiful because the ministry is expanding, and the beauty of it, it's not that Megan's ministry expanding, it's that Megan's using her opportunities to expand the ministry. And I think there's just this like, it's risky to give things away.
Yeah.
But I think it's beautiful. It's kingdom, and it's like the opposite of pride, which I am fighting against by the Spirit every day of my life. I don't even remember what your question was, but honestly, I think, less busy going into the summer. I canceled a few things. Sorry if any of those things are listening in. I'm going to Africa with my boys for 2.5 weeks. I got a vacation for the first time in a long time. I typically just tack on like an additional day with my boys when I speak places, and we call it vacation. Bless my boy's heart. We're doing a vacation this summer. I canceled some things for no other reason than just to have more summertime at the beach with my boys. Like, and these are really risky for me, vocationally. Risky. Like, oh, am I going to miss the opportunity to do the thing? In light of eternity, I don't want to live busy. But what I realized also is, and a friend, actually a wise friend, was like, then you got to risk. And I didn't put that together. I thought it was like, I'm just going to slow down. But then I wasn't. I was saying the exact same thing. I've called it a season, yet it's become a lifestyle. Stop it. I've had a busy lifestyle, and I'm changing and deciding to make a new season. And so this summer will be the beginning of that. It's a little crazy until then, but summer, I can't wait.
Friends, I hope you love that conversation. Megan Fate Marshman. Go find her on Instagram and give her a follow. Megan, thank you so much for the time. I loved every single second with you. Thanks for being the joy spreader that you are. Thanks to our amazing partners, IJM and Generous Coffee. Go find out more about both of those partners. Lastly, thanks to every single one of you who listens to the conversation. I'm so grateful, and that is why I do it. I do it for all of you, the listeners. Friends, have an awesome rest of your day.